My name is Sarah Wadlington, and the first time I realized my family could live perfectly fine without me was inside a hospital room that smelled faintly of bleach and lemon disinfectant. They said I'd been there for 3 days, but time doesn't flow right when you're sedated and hollow. I remember the lights humming overhead, too bright, too white, and how the nurse's voice kept calling my name like it was something fragile that might shatter if she spoke too loud. They said I'd had what they called a psychological collapse. The truth was simpler. I'd spent months trying to patch up the holes in other people's lives until I finally fell through one myself. Before the breakdown, I'd been staying with my parents, helping them fix up the house. That was the phrase they used. In reality, I was their unpaid contractor, scraping mildew off bathroom walls, repainting cabinets, rewiring outlets because Dad refused to hire anyone. Every time I stood on that ladder, sweat burning in my eyes, I told myself this was how you earn love, through labor, through exhaustion, through proving you're indispensable. I remember one July afternoon, halfway through sealing the gutters, my dad came out with a beer and said, "You've got a good hand for this, kiddo. Wish your brother took after you." I smiled, pretending it was praise, not a reminder that I'd become useful in all the ways that cost nothing. And then one morning I just stopped working, stopped pretending, stopped sleeping. By the fourth night of lying awake with my thoughts screaming louder than the cicadas outside, I locked myself in the bathroom. When the paramedics finally kicked down the door, I was sitting on the tile, shaking, whispering, I just wanted someone to notice. They kept me on a 72-hour psychiatric hold. It turned into 8 days. The first time they let me have my phone, my hands trembled so badly I could barely type. Please visit. I just need to see someone familiar. I sent it to everyone, Mom, Dad, my sister Emily, even Aunt Sharon. Nothing. No reply that night, no call the next day. The nurse told me families usually show up within 24 hours. I told her, mine are just busy, and smiled so she'd stop asking questions. On the 5th day, while scrolling through my cousin's posts, I froze. There they were, my entire family, beaming around a barbecue grill. Dad with his beer. Mom laughing. Emily doing her stupid peace sign in every photo. The caption read, "Summer nights with the best crew." I stared until my phone timed out. The walls pulsed white around me, and something inside went completely cold. They hadn't just not come, they'd celebrated. When they finally discharged me, I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just walked out into the morning light, carrying a paper bag of medication and an empty feeling that felt suspiciously like freedom. My phone had 20 missed calls. One unread message from Dad. "Call us back, we're family." I didn't. Not that day, not the next. Because something in me had broken, but not in the way they feared. I'd stopped trying to fix what didn't want to be repaired. Back at my apartment, the air felt heavy, like the walls had been waiting to exhale. Mail scattered across the floor. Coffee stains on the counter. It looked like someone else's life, one I'd borrowed too long. My phone buzzed again. "You good?" from Emily. Nothing about the hospital. Nothing about me. Just that hollow phrase people use when they want to sound concerned without doing the work. 3 more messages came over the next few days. "Hey, the water heater's out. You remember what you did last time? Garage door's jammed again. There's a leak in the laundry room ceiling. Can you come check it?" It was almost poetic. They hadn't noticed when I disappeared, but now that things were breaking again, suddenly I mattered. I didn't reply. That week, I started sleeping better. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full, thick, intentional. To test it, I posted a photo, a cup of coffee on my balcony, blue sky stretching endless behind it. Caption, "Peace feels better than obligation." 40 minutes later, Emily messaged me. "Must be nice ignoring everyone while we're dealing with real problems." For the first time in months, I replied. "You mean like when I was in the hospital and you ignored me?" She read it, never answered. That was when I knew the rules had changed. For years, I'd been the family repair woman, the peacekeeper, the daughter who shows up. But the moment I broke, I became disposable. So I decided to return the favor. A few days later, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I picked up anyway. "Hello? Why are you acting like this, Sarah?" Dad's voice. No greeting, no concern, just frustration. "We raised you better than this." I could almost picture him, arms crossed, jaw tight, mistaking guilt for love. I didn't answer. Just let the quiet stretch between us until it became unbearable. Finally, I whispered, "You didn't raise me. You used me." Then hung up. That night, my boyfriend David called. I hadn't spoken to him since before the breakdown. His voice was low, careful. I heard about what happened. Are you okay? I'm fine, I lied. He hesitated. Do you want company? I wanted to say yes, to tell him how lonely it felt to realize your family only misses your usefulness. But I couldn't. I wasn't ready for kindness. It felt foreign, dangerous. So I said, not tonight. He didn't push, just said, then promise me you'll rest. That small act, respecting my no, broke me more than all my family's silence combined. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The city outside was still. I brewed coffee and sat by the window, watching the first light spill through blinds like forgiveness I hadn't asked for. Somewhere between the first sip and the last, I understood something. They weren't calling because they cared. They were calling because their house was breaking down again. Because I was their tool, their wrench, their ladder. And for the first time, I decided not to fix it. When my phone buzzed again, Dad's number flashing like a ghost, I let it ring. Then another, then another. Finally, I set the phone down, turned the volume off, and whispered to the empty room, if I'm the one who keeps the house from falling apart, maybe it needs to collapse. The silence that followed wasn't punishment, it was peace. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty for choosing it. Silence became my new routine. For the first time in years, my life wasn't measured by the sound of someone else calling my name from another room, asking for help, demanding I fix something. I woke when I wanted, ate when I wanted, slept without my phone buzzing beside my bed. But quiet doesn't stay peaceful forever, it starts to echo. And that's when the calls began again. At first, I ignored them out of habit. Then the voicemails started piling up. Dad's voice came through the first one, stern and familiar. Sarah, the water heater's leaking again. I tried relighting the pilot, but it's not working. You know what you did last time? Delete. 2 days later, Mom. Your father can't open the garage door again. It's jammed. You know what you did last time? He's tried everything. Delete. Then Emily, her tone sharp, almost accusatory. You've been quiet for weeks. I don't know what's going on with you, but we need the ceiling in the laundry room looked at. It's starting to bow from the leak. Delete. 3 separate problems. 3 things I had already fixed before. 3 reminders that I was only visible when something broke. I sat on my couch, phone in hand, listening to the silence after the last voicemail. The apartment felt warmer than it should have, sunlight crawling across the floor like gold dust. That's when I realized something so simple, it almost made me laugh. They hadn't called because they missed me. They called because they couldn't manage without me. They didn't want me. They wanted my hands, my tools, my unpaid labor. That night, I made tea instead of answering. The kettle whistled louder than any of their voicemails. I sat on the balcony, watching the city glow under the evening haze. I took a photo, simple, almost cinematic. A cup of coffee, the skyline, my feet propped up. Caption: Peace feels better than obligation. It wasn't even directed at them, it was for me. But 40 minutes later, my phone lit up with a message from Emily. Must be nice ignoring everyone while we're dealing with real problems. For a moment, I just stared at it. Then I typed back, calm and precise. You mean like when I was in the hospital and you ignored me? She read it immediately. No reply. And that silence? It felt louder than any scream she could have sent. Days passed. The air felt lighter. I began to breathe again. I cleaned my apartment, not out of duty, but because I wanted to. I cooked for myself, painted a wall I'd been meaning to for months. Every task I used to do for them, I now did for me. And in that small rebellion, I found pieces of myself I hadn't seen in years. Then, one evening, my phone rang again. Dad. I didn't answer. A minute later, another call, then another. By the 5th, I picked up, not out of guilt, but curiosity. Why are you acting like this, Sarah? His voice was tight, already defensive. You think ignoring us is going to solve anything? We raised you better. I leaned against the window, staring at the night. You didn't raise me, I said softly. You used me. He sputtered, caught off guard. That's ridiculous. Is it? I asked. Who was the one up on the roof fixing leaks while you watched TV? Who cleaned the gutters when you wouldn't hire anyone? Who was there when you needed something? Every single time. Silence on the other end. I continued, my voice steady. You didn't raise me to be strong. You trained me to serve. Then I hung up, and for the first time in years, I didn't shake after a confrontation. I smiled. That night, David texted me. Still okay? I hesitated. He had always been gentle, patient, the kind of man who listened before offering advice, the kind I didn't know what to do with. I'm fine, I replied. You sure? I can bring dinner. Not tonight. A few seconds later, his reply came. Then promise me you'll sleep. It was such a small thing, but it felt like kindness shaped into words. A kindness that didn't demand anything in return. I sat in bed for a long time, staring at the ceiling. The thought hit me like a quiet confession. I had spent my entire life surrounded by people who loved what I did for them, not who I was. And maybe that's why I didn't know how to accept someone who wanted nothing from me at all. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The sky was pale gray, the kind that looks like it's holding its breath. I brewed coffee, sat by the window again, and watched as the first rays of light brushed the tops of buildings. I thought about my parents' house, the peeling paint, the leaky roof, the cracks I'd patched with my own hands. I could almost see it in my mind, the way the foundation trembled each time a storm hit. And I realized the house wasn't the only thing that had been breaking. It was them. It was me. It was the illusion that if I just worked hard enough, I could make something stable out of people who refused to hold themselves up. My phone buzzed again. Dad, this time a text. We need help, Sarah. The leak's spreading into the hallway. No greeting, no apology, just expectation. I typed one word. Oh. Then I blocked the group chat. That week, I slept through the night. No dreams, no dread. Just the kind of rest that comes from finally realizing you're allowed to stop bleeding for people who never bothered to notice you were hurt. And yet, part of me knew this was only the beginning. People like my family don't stop when you set a boundary. They wait, they regroup, they find new ways to pull you back in. But this time I wasn't afraid. Because silence wasn't my weakness anymore, it was my weapon. I turned off my phone, opened my laptop, and began sketching blueprints for something new. A freelance project I'd been offered before the breakdown. As the lines formed across the screen, I felt something solid returning to me. Direction. Each click of my mouse, each measured stroke, was a quiet act of rebellion. I wasn't fixing their house anymore, I was building my own future. And as the sun climbed higher, warm light flooding my apartment, I whispered to no one in particular, "Let it all fall apart, I'm done holding it up." It had been nearly 2 weeks since I'd blocked the family group chat. I didn't expect peace to feel so unfamiliar. Every morning, I'd wake up and reach for my phone, half expecting a guilt-laced message. We're worried. Don't be stubborn. Family sticks together. But there was nothing. Just silence. Until 2:08 a.m. one night. My phone buzzed once, lighting up the room. A voice message from Emily. No text, no greeting. Just her voice, strained, defensive, and a little scared. You're acting like we abandoned you, Sarah. You're being dramatic. Everyone has problems. You think you're the only one hurting? Mom's sick, but of course you wouldn't know that. Then it ended. I sat up in bed, heart pounding. Mom's sick? I replayed it twice, making sure I'd heard it right. No one had told me. Not while I was in the hospital, not during the weeks I begged for a visit, not even after I came home. They'd hidden it, and suddenly the old pattern began to whisper in my mind. Go to them, Sarah. Fix it. Be useful again. But this time I didn't move. Instead, I waited. Hours later, Emily texted again. She found a lump. It's probably nothing. They're running tests. Dad didn't want to tell anyone yet. That was it. No apology for hiding it. No acknowledgement that I was left out. Just an update, like I was a distant relative who'd lost the right to care. I typed, then erased, a dozen replies before settling on one word. Okay. Then I put the phone down and stared at the ceiling until morning. The next day, I didn't drive over. I didn't call. Instead, I did something I knew would sting them more than any confrontation ever could. I called Raphael, an old contractor I'd met years ago when I was still working maintenance jobs. He owed me a favor. Got a project for you, I said. My parents' place. It's falling apart again. Water heater, mold, ceiling repairs, the works. Who's paying? He asked. Not me, I said. But give them a real quote, not a favor price. The kind of number that makes people realize repairs aren't free. Raphael laughed. You're serious? Completely. By Friday, he'd already been by the house. Saturday morning, the calls started. The first one was Dad, his voice almost calm. Why would you send a stranger to our house? You think we need charity now? The second was angrier. $14,000, Sarah. Are you out of your mind? What game are you playing? And the third, short, cold, final. You better fix this. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my phone, took a photo of my laptop, blueprints on the screen, a quiet cafe in the background, and posted it to my story. Caption: Sometimes cutting ties is the real home improvement. Within the hour, I got a notification. Emily viewed it. Then another one. Dad. I smiled. That night, as I walked to my car, I noticed it immediately. 3 long scratches carved into the driver's side door. Deep, deliberate. Not random, not a coincidence. Someone had done it on purpose. I filed a police report, kept my voice steady as I answered questions. "Do you have any enemies?" the officer asked. I almost laughed. "Just family." He looked at me, uncertain whether I was joking. I wasn't. When I got home, the quiet felt different, charged. Not peaceful this time, but ready. I sat on the floor, back against the wall, staring at the stack of unpaid bills and old family photos I still hadn't thrown away. One picture caught my eye. Me, at 14, standing beside my mom in front of that same house. She was smiling, hand on my shoulder. She used to say, "You've got your father's strength." Now I realized she'd meant it as a warning, not a compliment. The next morning, my phone rang. The caller ID said, maybe Sharon, my aunt. I hesitated before answering. She hadn't spoken to me in months. "Hi, Aunt Sharon." Her voice came sharp. "I heard about the money." "What money?" "Don't play dumb, Sarah. Your father said you were supposed to help them with the repairs. They told the bank you were thinking of co-signing the loan." My stomach dropped. "What?" "That's what they said. They tried applying for a home equity loan, but with your dad's credit, they couldn't get enough. Your mom mentioned you'd come around soon." I pressed a hand to my chest, steadying my breath. They had used my name, again, assuming I'd fold eventually. "They said that?" I asked quietly. Sharon sighed. "I told them it wasn't fair. But you know your parents. They always said you were the dependable one, the one who always came home." I almost laughed. Not anymore. After I hung up, I sat in silence for a long time, my pulse pounding in my ears. That was it, the final piece. They hadn't hidden Mom's illness out of pride or fear. They'd done it to manipulate me, to make me feel guilty enough to pay. The realization didn't make me angry, it just made me clear, crystal clear. I unblocked the family group chat and typed slowly, deliberately. "You lied about where I was. You lied about what I did for you. You used me, then expected me to save you again. I'm not your handyman. I'm not your wallet. I'm not your daughter anymore. You're on your own." Then I hit send. 5 seconds later, I blocked them again. No tears, no shaking hands, no guilt. That night, I opened all the windows in my apartment and let the cool air rush in. I lay in bed, eyes open, listening to the distant hum of traffic. For the first time, the silence didn't feel like absence. It felt like ownership. It was mine. But as I drifted towards sleep, one thought slipped in uninvited, quiet but persistent. People like them don't take no for an answer. And I had a feeling, deep, certain, that this wasn't over. I used to think the worst thing my family could do was ignore me. Turns out the real betrayal is when they remember you, only to use your name for their benefit. After Aunt Sharon's call, I went down to the leasing office near my apartment and requested a credit freeze, just in case. The woman behind the counter asked if I'd been a victim of fraud. I wanted to laugh. Victim? No, not exactly. Just a daughter, learning what happens when you stop being convenient. 2 days later, I got a text from an unknown number. "Hi, this is Greg from the bank. Your father listed you as a cosigner on a home repair loan. Could you please confirm your consent?" I stopped reading. My stomach twisted, not from shock this time, but from the calm certainty that they would stoop this low. I called Greg immediately. "Don't approve anything," I said, keeping my voice steady. "If my name appears on a document I didn't sign, you'll be hearing from my lawyer." There was a pause. "Understood, Ms. Wadlington. I'll flag the file." When I hung up, I stared at my phone screen until the reflection of my own face blurred. How many years had I spent saving them from messes they created? This time, they'd tried to drag me into one without even asking. That evening, I drove past my parents' house. The paint had peeled even more since summer. The gutters sagged. The porch light flickered on and off, casting broken shadows across the front steps. It looked nothing like the home I'd spent months trying to hold together. It looked exactly like the people who lived inside it. I parked across the street and wrote a note, short and clean. "Don't ever use my name again. You've lost access to me and everything tied to me." I folded it, sealed it in an envelope, and slipped it into their mailbox. I didn't ring the doorbell, didn't wait to see if anyone noticed, just walked back to my car and drove away. The next morning, I found 3 new voicemails. The first one was Emily, her tone clipped and defensive. "So that's it? You're cutting us off completely? Mom's getting worse and you're out here playing hard to get?" Delete. The second was Dad. "This isn't you, Sarah. You don't throw away family." Delete. The third was quieter, trembling slightly. "Mom, we need you. The house is falling apart. We can't afford the repairs." I almost didn't delete that one. Almost. But then I remembered the barbecue photos, the silence after the hospital, the way they only called when something needed fixing. And I pressed delete. That weekend, I decided to tell the truth. Not online, not in some grand announcement. Quietly, deliberately. I started with the people who still believe my family's stories. Old neighbors, cousins, church friends. The ones who whispered, "Sarah's been distant lately," as if my absence was some cruel act instead of survival. I told them everything. The hospital stay, the ignored messages, the fake loan attempt. Some of them were shocked. Some didn't believe me. But a few, just a few, looked at me differently, with recognition, with understanding. It was enough. One evening, as the sky bled orange into night, David showed up at my door. He didn't knock hard, just once, softly. When I opened it, he held up takeout bags. "I brought dinner." I hesitated. "You didn't have to." He shrugged. "Maybe not, but I wanted to." We sat on the couch, eating quietly. He didn't ask questions, didn't pry, just existed beside me in that stillness, like he understood that companionship didn't have to mean conversation. At one point, he said, "You look lighter." I smiled, maybe because I stopped carrying everyone else's weight. He nodded slowly. "You know they might come back, right? People like that always do." "I know," I said, "but this time I'll be ready." He left around midnight. When the door closed, I walked to my desk and opened my journal. I hadn't written in months, but that night I poured everything out. The manipulation, the exhaustion, the final message I'd sent. And when I finished, I realized something strange. I didn't feel angry anymore. Just done. 2 days later, I got an envelope in the mail. No return address, but I knew the handwriting immediately. Dad's. Inside was a single sheet of paper filled with neat, deliberate writing. "The house is falling apart. The mold is spreading. We can't afford the foundation repairs. You don't throw away your family, Sarah. No matter what's happened, we're still blood." At the bottom, in smaller letters, "You can't just erase us." I stared at the page and then I laughed, quietly, almost kindly. Because he was right. I couldn't erase them, but I could choose not to be erased by them anymore. The next morning, I packed a small box. Nothing sentimental, just practical. My old toolbox, a pair of work gloves, and the single family photo I'd kept in a drawer. It was taken years ago. Mom, Dad, Emily, and me. I was maybe 15. I looked happy. But now I could see it. The way I was standing slightly apart, one shoulder turned, like I already knew I didn't quite fit. I placed the box on their porch and left a note taped to the top. "These are yours now. You can keep fixing the house without me." Then I walked away. The wind was cold that day, sharper than usual. As I drove back home, I didn't feel triumphant or spiteful. I just felt finished. Like closing a chapter you've reread too many times, knowing every line by heart. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about the word family, how people treat it like it's sacred, untouchable. But sometimes, family isn't who raised you, it's who respects your peace. Before I fell asleep, my phone buzzed once more, a new voicemail. It was Dad's voice, softer than I'd ever heard it. "Let's talk, one last time, no guilt, no begging, just talk." For a long time, I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the delete button. But then something in me shifted. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was closure. Either way, I didn't delete it. I just whispered into the dark. "One last time." And I knew exactly where this story would end. 3 days passed before I replied to Dad's voicemail. I kept listening to his message over and over again, waiting for some hint of manipulation hidden between the lines. But it wasn't there, just weariness. Maybe regret. So I texted back. "Okay, one conversation, neutral place." He answered within minutes. "The old diner by the highway. Saturday, noon. The same diner we used to go to after Sunday church when I was a kid. Sticky red booths. Coffee that tasted like burnt hope. It felt like an ending, somehow fitting. When Saturday came, I parked outside early and watched them through the window. Mom sat in the cornered booth, frail and pale, her scarf loose around her neck. Emily sat beside her, eyes fixed on her phone. Dad was facing the door, as if he'd been waiting for me to walk in all along. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. The smell of fried eggs and nostalgia hit me all at once. Every memory of forced smiles and half-truths came rushing back. When I reached the table, no one spoke. I slid into the seat across from them. Dad cleared his throat first. "We didn't handle things right," he said, staring into his coffee. "Your mom's not doing well. The test came back. It's bad." I didn't react. I didn't know how to anymore. Mom's voice came next, soft, shaky. "We miss you, Sarah, but we don't really know you anymore." That one hurt. Not because it was cruel, but because it was true. I looked at her, really looked, at the wrinkles carved deeper by worry, at her trembling hands, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel anger, just distance. "You don't know me," I said quietly, "because you never tried to. I was never your daughter. I was your solution." Emily looked up from her phone, eyes flashing. "That's not fair." I met her gaze. "You remember the message I sent from the hospital? The one where I begged you to visit?" She didn't answer. Her silence said enough. Dad rubbed his forehead. "We thought you'd bounce back. You always do." And there it was, the truth I'd been waiting for. They hadn't ignored me because they didn't care. They'd ignored me because they thought I was unbreakable. That wasn't love. That was dependence disguised as faith. I sat back, letting the truth settle between us like dust in sunlight. "I'm not here to fix anything," I said. "I'm not coming home. I'm not rewiring your house or paying your bills. If you want to know me, the door's open. But if you just want the fixer, she's gone." No one spoke for a long time. Even the diner seemed quieter than usual. The clink of silverware muffled, conversations fading to background static. Mom stared at the table, Emily's jaw clenched. Dad's eyes glistened, but he didn't cry. Finally, he whispered, "We were wrong." Something in his tone stopped me. It wasn't an apology meant to manipulate, it was surrender. And for the first time, I believed him. We sat there for nearly an hour after that, talking about small things. The weather, my work, how quiet the house had become since I'd left. Mom didn't ask me to come back. Emily didn't roll her eyes. Dad didn't lecture me. It was almost normal. When I stood to leave, Mom reached out, touching my hand gently. Her skin was cold, paper thin. "You were always the strong one," she said. "I just wish we hadn't mistaken that for invincibility." I squeezed her hand once, then let go. "I wish the same." Then I walked out. Outside, the air felt crisp, the kind of clear cold that makes you feel awake, alive. I stood in the parking lot for a moment, watching my reflection in the diner window. Me on the outside, them still inside. A perfect metaphor. I didn't cry. I didn't feel triumphant either. Just steady. As I started the car, my phone buzzed again. A voicemail. Emily's voice this time. Calm, almost gentle. "Hey, Sarah. Mom started treatment. It's worse than they thought, but she's hanging in there. I just thought you should know. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know." Then silence. I didn't delete it. Later that night, I sat on my balcony again. The same place where I'd once posted that photo captioned, "Peace feels better than obligation." The city lights below shimmered like tiny promises I'd finally learned to believe in. I replayed Emily's message, listening to the tone, the shift. It wasn't guilt this time. It wasn't manipulation. It was honesty, raw, unpolished, but real. Maybe this was how reconciliation began, not with grand apologies, but with quiet truth. David called around 9. "How did it go?" he asked. I thought for a moment before answering. Strangely peaceful. He laughed softly. "That's a first." "Yeah," I said, "it is." Then I told him about the diner, the conversation, the feeling of release. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he said, "You sound like someone who finally stopped bleeding." I smiled. Maybe I just learned that some wounds don't need to close. They just need to stop being reopened. After the call, I stood in front of my mirror, studying the woman looking back at me. Same face, same eyes, but lighter somehow. I wasn't the fixer anymore. Wasn't the silent repair woman patching other people's damage. I was just Sarah. No titles, no obligations. And that was enough. The next morning, I woke to sunlight spilling across my floor. I made coffee, opened my journal, and started writing. Not about pain or betrayal this time, but about possibility. About the quiet joy of choosing peace over loyalty. My final entry read, "Maybe healing isn't about mending what broke. Maybe it's about learning which pieces were never mine to fix." I closed the notebook, set it aside, and breathed. The air felt lighter. Outside, a bird landed on the balcony railing, chirping once before flying off. I smiled. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for someone else to call, to need me, to validate me. I wasn't waiting for the house to collapse or for the next crisis to arrive. I was simply living. And the silence that once haunted me now felt like freedom, steady, endless, and fully mine.